The title of today's webinar is Tackling the Problem of Pet Projects with Benefits Management. Our speaker today is Claire Dellar of NHS Digital. Quick introduction to Claire. She says, grateful for her unbelievable fortune in having actually found something useful to do with her education. As an experimental and behavioral economist, Claire makes for an engaging and entertaining speaker. In the field of benefits and portfolio management, she is an expert in changing the behavior and mindset of organizations, improving their return on investment, whilst also making them happier places to work. As a portfolio benefits and change management professional, Claire is well known in project management circles for her innovative approach to problem solving and her positive leadership, particularly on gender and disability in the workforce. Having spent over 15 years in the police and NHS, she has now founded an international consultancy, Transformist Limited, with the aim of changing society through reversing the 70% failure rate of projects. To do this, she is building a conscience-led international consultancy of world-class specialists in their field. She also chairs the NHS National Benefits Management Specific Interest Group and leads on benefits and value thought leadership in the volunteer committee of the APM Benefits and Value Specific Interest Group. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you so much. So let's get started. We're going to be talking about benefits today, but we're also talking about objectives, because the objectives are how we make decisions. And an objective, here's my definition, it's a vision of how the organisation needs to look in the future in order to be able to meet its purpose. Now, every organisation has a purpose in a reason for existing, and the NHS, for instance, exists to protect the health and well-being of the people of the UK, or a company such as Transformists exists to improve the world, improve society through raising the bar, increasing the success of projects. So we all have a purpose in our organisations. The organisation has a reason for existing. But if organisations stayed the same, they wouldn't be able to meet their purpose in the future. We've seen that, haven't we, over the last 3 months? Organisations that have not, for instance, adopted these kinds of webinars and virtual technology are not able to meet their purpose as well as they might. So what we have with an objective is a vision of what the organisation needs to look like, or the system needs to look like. So we're not talking we need to build a dementia academy, as one NHS trust said to me. We're talking we need to improve the health and well-being of people living with dementia and be one of the best providers of dementia care in the UK. So the organisation needed to be good at dementia care. We weren't talking about what the buildings were going to be, what the teams were going to look like. We were talking what we had to look like in order to meet our purpose of keeping people healthy and well. So APMs Purpose, I've got this from the website, inspiring communities to deliver meaningful change for societal benefit by advancing the art, science, theory and practice of project management. Now, when APM came to me and asked me to write the e-learning module for them on benefits management, which some of you might have seen, because we said, you might find it interesting to do that before you join the webinar. They said, we need a worked example. We need to use an example through this. I said, great, brilliant. What's on your mind at the moment? And they said, our car parking. We have a real problem with wanting to expand, but we haven't got space. So how can we continue to inspire people to deliver meaningful change for societal benefit if we can't get into the office? Now, of course, that's become quite topical, hasn't it, over the past few months. So what we need to look at for each objective is what's the problem or the need or the opportunity. Now, Prince 2, for instance, talks about problems, needs and opportunities. APM PMP does, managing benefits does, various management of portfolio, they all talk about starting a project with the problem, the need or the opportunity. Why are we not currently meeting our objective? Why are we not currently, or why will we not in 5 years' time, be able to inspire communities to bring about societal change? So what's the problem, need or opportunity? And they identified their problem was they couldn't get people into the office. We're not talking about jumping to an app. We're talking about actually thinking first what it is that the problem that we need to solve, or we need a dementia academy, we need a dementia unit. No, what's the problem that we need to solve that means that people aren't getting the care they need? What's the reason why we are not able to be in the future the organisation that inspires communities to bring about change? Let's think about the problem before we actually jump to our solution. Now, this is not a problem that is restricted to the NHS. I find this wherever I go, organisations say, yeah, we'd love to start with that, but it's not always the case. So tell me, how often does your organisation start its problems with the solution versus starting with that objective and defining what are the problems? Oh, somebody voted that they always start with the objective. Brilliant. Very rare to get that. You obviously work in an organisation that really knows its management, knows its project management here. Has got a benefits mindset. See, all those, I haven't mentioned benefits yet, but it is about the benefits mindset. It's about starting with what happens if I fix these problems. Okay, so we've got 88 now, 2.9, so halfway between the two seems to be about the case at the moment. Half the time we're starting with the solution, half the time we're starting with the objective. And in that I can see here on the left-hand side, 35 people voting for almost always start with the solution. And only 15 voting for always start with the objective. So this is a common problem, isn't it? We've all got this to face in our organisations, and we do it ourselves. It's natural human behaviour. We haven't got time to be thinking about, you know, how we're going to fix this issue. You know, what are the deep causes of it? We jump to an immediate solution. So that's great, thank you. So we're looking for the problem, need, or opportunity. So APM's issue with wanting to encourage people to work remotely or walk or cycle to work, but their office didn't have enough facilities for lots of people to cycle in. So what do we do with that problem, which is preventing us from meeting APM's objectives, which are about how the organisation needs to look in the future for them to be able to still inspire us to be a community for change? So the government wants us all to cycle to work at the moment, don't they? So we're not going on public transport. But how can APM achieve that when it doesn't have the facilities? Well, the question we need to ask ourselves is, what happens if we fix that problem? How will we know it's been fixed? And how can we decide between different options for fixing that? And that's what I'm going to be talking about in today's session. But first of all, we need to define our term. That what does it look like if we fix it is basically a benefit. And I get asked all the time, what actually are benefits? And you know what? I see all these business cases with some very bizarre benefits in them. So let's see. The textbook definition then is it's measurable. First of all, you can actually measure it. If it isn't measurable, then it's a lovely description, a very nice story that you're telling, may be of use for stakeholder engagement. It doesn't count as a benefit, it needs to be measurable. Doesn't mean it has to be financial, but it does have to be measurable. And second is it's advantageous to a stakeholder. Somebody cares about it. Now, a stakeholder, you've got different stakeholders involved in your projects in different groups. And some of them are going to have to deal with stuff that's actually disadvantageous to them as well. And we call those disbenefits. So we need to both be able to measure it, and we need to know who cares about it. Whose problem are we fixing here? And the third is it contributes to an organisation objective. Now, my question for a lot of organisations when they come to me, we've got all these wonderful benefits, this project looks great, and I say, do any of them actually contribute to your organisation objectives? No. Then they're nice to have, but they're not what you should be spending your money on. Organizations have scarce resources. So I've put a thumbs up and a thumbs down on here. I'd really love you to send me thumbs up if you see this, if this is your organization's definition of a benefit. Give me thumbs downs if your organization doesn't use this as a definition of a benefit. Do your benefits look like this? Well, great, we've got a good mixture. Mostly people are saying, yes, our organization does understand that benefits should look like this, but we have got a significant number who are saying, actually, no, our organizations don't, and don't worry about it. You're not alone. As you can see, you know, we're roughly 3/4 to 1/4. So 25% of us have said there, our organizations don't really understand what a benefit is. So let me ask you, do you think this is a benefit? Give me a thumbs up if you think this is a benefit, thumbs down if you think, no, this isn't a benefit, this doesn't meet the test. Everyone will be able to securely store their bike while at work. Ooh, interesting. We're about level pegging. Is this a benefit? Does it meet those 3 tests? Yeah, we're getting quite a lot of votes here. A lot of people, we've got 43 saying no, 63 saying yes. That's cool, yeah. So, is this a benefit? Well, actually, no, it's not. It sounds like something that's good, doesn't it? It's something which tugs at our, yes, surely that's a good thing. And it's a good thing is, it's a good instinctive test, but it doesn't mean it's a benefit. Yes, I can measure it, but I'm not really talking about why I should care about this, why that's advantageous to the stakeholder, how I'm directly contributing to the organization objective. I've been a little unfair to you here because I wanted to see how people voted before I explained in a bit more detail. So that benefit needs to directly say, this is why it's good, this is how it contributes to the organization objective. And when we often look at these, we can see that more than one stakeholder might actually get something from it, or in different ways. So this is an extract from a benefits map, similar to the one that was used in the APM e-learning. And there's our objective, to have a highly skilled and motivated workforce. That comes from the APM website. And the direct benefit that we're talking about there is actually staff satisfaction with the facilities and the safety of their bike. Now that leads us to an outcome, which is the result of change, which is that staff are able to commute in a way that they're happy with. And that comes about because staff are willing to cycle to work. Now, staff are willing to cycle to work because they can use the facilities. Oh, I've got a typo in there. Because staff are able to securely store their bike while at work. So you can see how actually I've had to explain a bit more as to why this is a good thing for this particular stakeholder. And can you see how actually it could be advantageous to a different stakeholder? Because by having a cycle to work, we are not contributing to CO2 emissions. And that means that the general public are benefiting from it. And it could also be that staff are doing other trips on their bikes, which would mean less in the way of having to pay mileage on APM's behalf. So this is a little extract from the benefits map that this sits in. Now, this session is not about benefits mapping, so I will share the full map with you at the end. It'll go out in the packs that will come to you, but I will be focusing more on how do we make decisions based on this benefits thinking about what happens, what's the measurable improvement, advantageous to a stakeholder that contributes to an organization objective if I fix the problem that's stopping us meeting that objective. So really, benefits thinking, this is the wisdom of the Backstreet Boys. Tell me why. Why are you doing this? Don't say, we want an app, we want a dementia academy, we want a new hospital, we want a data set, we want a new service. Tell me why you want to do it. What's the problem, the need, the opportunity that's being met by doing so? And when I fix that problem, or when you fix that problem, your benefits is your measure of how successfully you've fixed the problem. And of course, the problem is what's stopping you meet the objective. So we want to know, how much does this benefit contribute to us now meeting that objective? So I'm showing my age, aren't I? Talking about the Backstreet Boys. Oh, the memories of my childhood. Well, teenage years, certainly. So the benefit was actually high staff satisfaction with facilities and safety. Give me a thumbs up if this is how you would see your organisation framing it. Thumbs down if they wouldn't get this. Thumbs up if this is the kind of benefit that they would understand to be a benefit. It's measurable, isn't it? It's advantageous to a stakeholder, and we know how it contributes to that objective because it gives us a motivated workforce. Brilliant. Okay. So great. So we're seeing some really interesting results there. That not everybody is in an organisation that yet understands how a benefit should actually look. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll be able to take this away and say, hey, you know, have we thought about it this way? Perhaps we might make some better decisions if we looked at it from a benefits mindset. So yes, it's measurable. Staff satisfaction is measurable. It's advantageous to the staff. They're the stakeholder group. So they're our beneficiary, we call them, people who get the benefit. And it contributes to our organisation objective through motivating our workforce. Lovely. So that's defined our terms, our benefits terms. And there you go. I've showed you how actually this can also have other benefits. So this could also increase staff satisfaction, can increase staff retention, and that can have benefits for the organisation. Now, how many of us, if we'd started with staff are able to securely store their bike while at work, we'd just thought about it from the staff perspective? Easily done. But actually, by thinking about it this way and looking at all the ways that it's beneficial to different stakeholders, we come to the true value of the project. We could have been undervaluing stuff because we weren't thinking about it from the perspective of APM saving their recruitment costs. We were only thinking about it from the staff. So that is why I would not use staff able to securely store their bike as a benefit. I want to know specific to that stakeholder why they value it. Why is this important to us? So value, an important word that's going to come around time and again in the rest of this presentation. So why have I called this the death of the pet project? And I said I'd share with you my pet, one of my pets. This is Orinoco. He was a rat of very little brain, but he was a lovely, friendly little animal. So the death of the pet project. What is a pet project? Well, pet projects are the things where people go, I've got this idea and I'm going to make it happen, and I want to build an app, or I want to have this service, or I want us to use this particular piece of software. Usually after people have been to conferences. Does that strike a note with you guys? Yeah, I know when NHS conference has happened, because they come back and you go, oh, this system supplier's got such and such, and I go, yes, and somebody else has it better and cheaper. So why are we talking about this as the death of the pet project? Well, if we actually look at those benefits, we should, for a start, be able to spot the ones that aren't going to realise any benefits. But secondly, we're also interested in evaluating different projects against each other. So by having these benefits, it allows us to understand how the project is contributing to the objectives. And you might have one project that's contributing more than another to a more or less important objective. Or you might have within a project different options as to how you could achieve the same thing. So there are ways of evaluating options in a business case. There are ways of evaluating even down to different ways of meeting the same requirement. So you can take this at every level in an organization, from that very highest portfolio level, which of these projects and programs should we be putting our money into, our resources, our staff, because that's a scarce resource, isn't it? And all the way down to which of these different ways should we take to meet this requirement within this work stream of this project. Now, why am I talking about meeting objectives? Well, when organizations have mature benefits management, 92% of the time they realize objectives. And when they don't have mature benefits management, they only manage to realize their objectives 33% of the time. That's from the latest PMI survey, Pulse of the Profession. It's an international survey done every year, sent to thousands of professionals around the world. And every year, this gap gets bigger and bigger as people realize actually just how difficult it is to really realize your objectives and the right objectives when you don't think in a benefits mindset. So tell me, thumbs up if you're in the 92% category, thumbs down if you're in the 33% category. Have you got mature benefits management or immature benefits management? Oh, interesting. Lots of you saying immature benefits management. That's really good to know. So yeah, that loads of you all in the same boat. You've all got the same difficulties. Your organizations don't have sufficient benefits maturity to be able to maybe even first identify their objectives. You know, if they're like that NHS trust and their objectives are, we're going to open a dementia academy, it's going to be easy to realize, but it's not actually going to help you to meet your purpose. And you've jumped to your solution before thinking about what the problem was. Wow, that's a really strong indication there. We've got 11 people saying, yes, we're in our 92% category. 81 of you saying we're in the immature benefits management, low project success. Wow, and you're not alone. That is borne out in all of the research. You are very much reflecting the normal there. So one of the problems with an attitude of immature benefits management, where it's just about ticking a box, tell me if you recognize this. Thumbs up if you don't fall into this trap. Thumbs down if you do, if your organization falls into this trap. Darren Dalker says, the emphasis is on identifying benefits, not as a basis for managing their realization, but just in order to justify the costs. We've already decided we want an app, go find me the benefits that say that that's the best option. Oh, if I had 100 quid for every time I've been asked that, I'd be pretty fairly well off. I would not be buying second-hand cars, let's put it that way. So if your organization unfortunately uses benefits to justify the cost required, thumbs down. Thumbs up if you've escaped this trap and you actually are thinking benefits, how do I make them happen? How do I realize them? Not just how do I get my business case passed? The National Audit Office said about the NHS National Programme for IT that the implementation of IT caused massive inconvenience, disruption, and poor value for money for the taxpayers. So if they can say that about that project, they can say it about a large number of other projects. You're not on your own here. And a lot of the time, the problem is our benefits mindset isn't there. We're not thinking, how do I make this happen? How do I make a difference? Remember, APMs Purpose, making a difference, changing society by introducing project management. So that's a really useful Darren Dalker quote. I'm not surprised that slightly more than half of you are saying, yeah, unfortunately, we fall into this trap of using it to justify our costs. So we're going to have a bit of a practical exercise. This is something, value management calls it the value index. APM PMQ, I think, calls it the decision matrix. I think Prince 2 calls it something similar. You've probably all seen these kinds of things before. Now, the purpose of one of these decision grids, decision matrices, is to help you compare your options. And remember, I said that could just be options of how to meet a particular requirement, all the way up to which project should we invest in at a really high level. You know, we do these all the way up to ministerial level and all the way down to an individual sprint team doing a 2-week sprint on the NHS app, for instance. So the idea of one of these grids, the idea of the grid is that we have a number of criteria that we rate each of our options against. And in a simple one, you might have, say, cost, risk, the availability of my resources, and you also want to know how well it meets some objectives. So that's what the grid looks like, the simple version of the grid. Now, the thing is, not all criteria are born equal. Sorry, George Orwell, to misquote Animal Farm, but not every criterion in that list is going to be of equal importance to the organization. Sometimes you will be in an organization which is currently cash rich, and therefore the cost, whilst it's important, is not as important to them as how well it meets an objective, for instance. Organizations where cost is very important, not only is the cost of the project going to be important, but whether it meets financial objectives as well as non-financial objectives is going to be important. So what we actually want to do is weight our criteria. And we're going to do this, we're going to have a go at this ourselves. Now, we've got a couple of different objectives that I believe the APM are, they'll either be implicit or explicit ones. So we know highly skilled and motivated workforce, for instance. What I want to know from you is, does your organization weigh its criteria? Does it give different importance to different criteria? Thumbs up if it does, thumbs down if it doesn't. Now, when we weigh criteria, we need to make a value judgment, don't we, as to which is more important or how important is one or the other. And so it means that we're not in a position where something has just come out with the highest number of points, but it got the most points in the important categories. That's the aim of this. Brilliant. Okay, so, you know, a fair number if you weight your criteria. I'm really glad to see that. That's brilliant news. Now, this is one of the ways that you can determine how you're going to weight your criteria, and it's called pairwise comparison. And basically, you're saying, is X more important than Y? And you always ask pair. So, is highly skilled and motivated workforce more or less important than the operating budget? Is the operating budget more or less important than environmental credentials? These are all objectives which most organizations, I suspect, have. Certainly APM's explicit objective is highly skilled and motivated workforce. So you're going to have a go for me at pairwise comparison. I'm only going to ask it once, but you should really ask it both ways around. But I'm only going to ask it once. And my wonderful assistant is going to help me with this. He's going to work out the points for me. So every time you vote for something, you're giving it points. You're saying it's more important we have a highly skilled and motivated workforce than our impact on the operating budget. Oh, and you are saying that quite clearly. Next question, which is more important, the highly skilled workforce or the environmental credentials? And I'm going to ask the last question. Is the operating budget more important than the environmental credentials? And as I say, to avoid bias, because we can be slightly biased towards the first thing we hear, to avoid bias, you would in reality ask this 6 times because you'd reverse the questions. Or you use something like SurveyMonkey, which has an automatic random setting. So it'll ask them, it'll randomize which way around it asks them for different people. Brilliant, thank you. So what we do is we give it a weight, and I'm using a scale of 1 to 5. Hugo there was giving us You know, 18% of the vote is low, and therefore it gets a 1. Over 80% of the vote would have been high, and it would have got a 5. And this is how you are able to take a large stakeholder group with different opinions and come to a consensus on the overall score. So that's great. We've filled in the weight. So what's going to happen now is we're going to look at each of our individual options as to how we might achieve our objective. We're going to do this within the context of the project. We're not looking at this at an organisation level. I don't want you going off on flights of fancy of how we can fix our environmental problems, much as we must. We're going to look in this individual project our different options, and I've given us 3. Just a bike shed, just putting in showers so people can get themselves freshened up before work, or having both a bike shed and having showers. There we go. So I said I'd share with you the full benefits map. We can have a cycle to work scheme where we've got a bike shed. We can convert a storage room maybe to showers and changing facilities, and all the different changes, the results of change is an outcome. So all the different changes that we would make all eventually lead to people using the facilities and therefore being happy with the way they're commuting to work. And so we've got high staff satisfaction. But of course, we said, didn't we, we increase staff retention, which reduces our recruitment costs. Now, notice down the bottom here in the benefits column, we've got a red post-it, and a red one is a disbenefit. And of course, having the showers in there is going to increase our facilities cost. That's not a project cost. Putting the showers in is a project cost. But long term, someone's going to have to clean it. Somebody's going to have to maintain the showers, you know, test the water pressure, replace things that get broken. So that is going to be an increased cost on the organisation. And there, I've also put in our environmental credentials, though, needs of simplicity, not having a map that's so small that you can't read all the post-its on it. I haven't put in all of the outcomes and the benefit that would contribute to that. So we've got our idea of our different options. We could just build a cycle shed, and if we did that, then the bottom half of the map would basically disappear. We wouldn't have the facilities costs, but it would also probably reduce the amount that people use the facilities. On the other hand, if we just put in the shower room, people could get clean, but they couldn't store their bike. So, you know, that's probably going to have an effect on the level of benefits, whilst having that increased disbenefit, that increased ongoing cost on the facilities. So we're going to have a go at scoring your options. Now, I'm only going to give you one of the options for the moment, just for keeping time. Do you, as an organisation, thumbs up, do you take your options and score them against your objectives? Thumbs down if you don't. And options could be how we're going to solve the problem of people not being able to get GP appointments, or it could be how we're going to solve the problem of people not being able to get through to our call centre. These are all different options, but do we actually score them and see how well they perform on different criteria? Interesting, so most of you don't. So you know your objectives, because you said to me, we do weight our objectives. We know that some objectives are more important than others, but then you don't score your options against them. That's really interesting stuff. And it doesn't surprise me, because you are not alone in this. All of the research shows that a large proportion of organisations out there don't have this kind of nuanced decision making. And that's what we're doing. We're making decisions here. Okay, so I'd like you to tell me, how big a contribution do the options make? Now, we're talking to the highly skilled and motivated workforce. Is it a low contribution up to a high contribution? How big a contribution just having a bike shed will that make to having a highly skilled and motivated workforce? Having just showers, how much will that affect motivating in a workforce? Having both of them, yeah, I can see, absolutely. You've spotted it, haven't you? That you can't do one without the other if you want the full impact. Yeah, so we said our objective, in order to, in the future, APM enact, encourage, inspire change in our communities, the better of society. They can't do that without a skilled and motivated workforce. And we're saying you can't really do that if you don't have both a bike shed and showers. So we've now taken the views of 91 stakeholders. Our bike shed scores 2, our showers scored 1.9, and the combined effort scored 4.3. So there we go. And what's happened is the spreadsheet has automatically multiplied for me the weight by the score. So the bike shed scored 2, multiplied by 3 is 6. And if you want more nuance, you can have it show decimal points. Now, we can here see all 3 of those objectives. I've taken your weights that you gave me, I've put in some imaginary scores, and that's how it would look for the 3 objectives. So for instance, we've got the operating budget. Well, the bike shed maybe scored 2, the showers was going to have more of an impact on the operating budget. So, it was going to be a disbenefit as well as causing a benefit. So I scored that as 1. Putting the bike shed and the showers together, one balancing out the other, I gave it a score of 2. But we don't just include the objectives. As I said, we also talk about things like financial achievability, risk, the scale of the project, and whether or not we can get resources. And here, these are standard inclusions in the value index. Different methodologies use different things. Some of them leave it up to you as an organization to decide what's important to you. If you're doing the Prince 2 style decision matrix, the organization sets these. So it's up to you, but we will give you this as a template to take away and use yourselves. And you can see how it's scored across each of the options. So just a bike shed here, it's scored quite low around the objectives. It's scoring about a 2, and then it's easy to do. So the resource score is actually quite good. So it got quite a high weighting for its score on the resources, but resources only of medium importance to us. So how much we care about it. So it actually came out as the middle option, and our preferred option, the green, is both the bike shed and the showers. So let's return to our Mentimeter. That is how I would say that benefits mindset, the benefits thinking, value thinking, can lead us to a situation where we no longer have pet projects in our organizations, because group decision making on externally evaluated or at least commonly agreed objectives and criteria that you have understood the bearing importance of allows you to score your options and clearly show in a certainly defensible way why you've chosen a particular option. And that is why I call benefits management the death of the pet project. So I want to know from you, give me your thoughts. How might you use your value index to get rid of pet projects in your organization? Where might you use it? With whom might you use it? What are you going to do with this now that you've got it? Yeah, business cases. Oh yes, popular. Focus on what really matters. Yes, absolutely. And you can decide which criteria are in there, and your stakeholders, the decision makers, get to set the criteria. And if they've set the criteria, they can't really complain when their pet project doesn't come out with the highest score. Front-end portfolio management, options appraisal, yes, absolutely. Business case options appraisals, the economic case, this is absolutely where we should be putting it. And at the portfolio level, and programs, yes. Programs are vehicles for making change in our organization. Which of the change options is going to be best? And what are the different ways, and which is the best of the different ways that we could provide the outputs that are necessary for that change? Stop senior managers working backwards from a shiny idea. You've just Whoever that was, you've just beautifully summed up my entire presentation in one sentence. Well done. Help sponsors understand what their objectives are. Yes. I don't know about you, but the number of sponsors who think their objective is to build a bike shed. Apply this when we're reviewing and developing business cases and PIDs. Brilliant. In flight, yes. Reevaluation in flight, absolutely. And of course, our environment has changed. All our priorities have changed, haven't they, over the last few months? I bet your objectives now are either not what they were 4 months ago, or they have different priorities. And we have that scarce resource. We only have a limited budget. We've only got a certain number of people. How do we use them most effectively? And when we have fewer people, because we've had to furlough them, how do we use them more effectively? Which are the things that we should be concentrating on? In-flight evaluation, absolutely important. We have to keep reevaluating this. Debrief, did we set out to achieve? Yes, that's brilliant. Remove the emotion from the decision making, yeah, and bias, I saw bias somewhere else. Portfolio prioritization in the light of COVID-19, totally, absolutely, that's what a lot of us are using it for, integral part of the business case. So instead of going to my would you like to ask a question page, can I ask you to call them out to me?
So I noticed you did the weighting independently of the available options. The question is this important? There's a few questions similar to that. Do you do a priority weighting for each options appraisal?
The important thing there is that you've decided what the criteria is before you look at what you're going to score against it, because otherwise you're giving yourself the opportunity to bias yourself by going, oh, if I make sure that this objective is included and given a high weight, then my pet option will score higher. Yeah. So yes, you have to do the objectives first and you have to weight them first. And it's best to do them, if you can, at the portfolio level. Now, it's still useful to do it at the project level. Maybe the project board can be the stakeholder group, or a stakeholder advisory committee, and to do it at the program level. But really, for this to work across organisation and to be able to compare different projects within the organisation, those objectives have got to be set at the top. It's part of the job of the board of directors to set the objectives that the investment can be made against, and they should be setting those priorities. And that way you can compare your bike shed in facilities project with your new conference app in the ICT department. Does that answer that one, Hugo?
I think that probably does, yes.
Okay.
Another question is, are options carefully selected to reach the wanted conclusion? In other words, how do you ensure you get valid options?
Yes, this is called the Goldilocks business case. Not my term, it's Joseph Lowe, the creator of the Treasury 5-case model. One option is obviously too hot, one is obviously too cold, and the other is just perfect and therefore should come up with the right scores. Yeah, you will still get some of that. Part of the job of a good assurance function is to ensure that options are actually genuine options. Now, to some extent, this will help, because your supposedly just perfect option will have to not only meet the objectives, but meet the right ones. But still doesn't mean that you don't have a part to play as part of your benefits thinking, as part of your business case assurance, that people are actually giving you genuine options to work with. But if you get one that scores very, very highly and all the others score very, very lowly, it's obvious that somebody's done your Goldilocks business case.
Excellent. So here's a real meta question. Do you weight some of the stakeholders as more important than others, so that their weighting of their score? Do you weight a stakeholder's weighting?
Now that's an interesting thing you could do. You very much could do. What you could do is weight the stakeholders and then multiply their score by their weighting. and then feed that weighted score into it. Could you do that? The other thing I would do would be making sure that your stakeholder group that you're putting out to is balanced. And if you feel that it's important to have a lot of voices from a particular stakeholder group, then make sure there are plenty of them in there. What you've got to be careful with is not introducing your own bias as to who you think is more important. So ensuring that you are hearing voices from all across the organisational system.
So here's a one that is a little bit of a recap of one of the ones that's already been asked. But there are leaders out there who are convinced that they want to get their pet projects through. How do you convince them that a weighting approach is the right approach? They recognise the threat.
Yes, and they will recognise this as a threat. Well, I try to outflank them quite often, and I've found that non-exec directors are particularly useful for that. Also the finance director, whoever's being held to account. But it's part of a larger issue of accountability within organisations for SROs, senior responsible owners, and also for the board in and of itself. You know, the board should be looking to have something which demonstrates that it has made at least a considered and defensible decision. And so should the project not work, and we know that, you know, through no fault of our own, many projects have had to be changed or failed over the past few months because of COVID-19, for instance. But that at least gives us a defensible position and a tool for adapting quickly when things do go wrong. So it can be part of the solution, but it isn't the whole thing. But for instance, in one of the NHS trusts, or several of the NHS trusts I've worked in, I've introduced something called benefits contracts. Now, these are documents where the SRO or the benefit owner signs up to say, I believe this benefit is achievable and realistic, and I commit to doing my best to make it happen. And when I did that, our average success in our savings projects went from about 60% to 99%, not just because of the contracts, but because I built it into their performance review as well. And that meant that their bonus or whatever was on the line. Now, when you do that on a larger scale with an organisation, so not focusing on an individual benefit, but on the use of appropriate tools such as the value index, it can have quite a significant impact. Is that any good, Hugo? Does that solve that one?
Yes, and here's one of the oldest ones in benefits management. How do you stop outcomes being identified as benefits on large projects? E.g., more bike parking spaces becomes a benefit itself.
Yes. Well, first of all, we use something called the so what test. And if you say to me, we'll all be able to store our bikes, and I go, so what? And you go, well, that means that we'll be able to cycle to work. And I go, so what? And you say, well, that means that actually we'll be able to get to work given that we're not allowed on public transport. And I go, so what? And you go, well, actually, I will be able to do my job, and therefore I will get my wages. Now, suddenly you've got something that stakeholder cares about. If you're doing it from the organisation's perspective, everybody's cycling to work, so what? Well, that means that we'll have enough parking spaces for those who do need to drive, so what? Well, our staff satisfaction will be higher because they're not frustrated by the parking situation. That's probably a benefit, but I might even take that an extra one further and say, well, that means we also don't lose people through frustration, so it reduces our costs on recruitment. It's that single stakeholder directly contributing to an organisation objective, meeting that so what test and measurable.
Thank you very much for excellent and very informative talk, Claire. And thank you to everyone who's attended. And of course, we're absolutely delighted that Claire's been able to give us such wonderful information.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.